Bennett, Kathy, Jason, and John, first and foremost, I want to let you know how much our hearts hurt for you right now. Sherry and I know how close your family is, and we've been praying for God's peace and his comfort to rest on all four of you during this season of grieving. And I also want to let our EFCOC family know how much we really wish we could be there this afternoon with you to remember and to celebrate Brian's life. We were just as shocked and saddened as each one of you to learn of the sudden passing of our friend, and we grieve right along with you. But I also want to remind each of you that Brian has also left us something to celebrate. I met Brian 13 years ago, almost to the day. I was a brand new English pastor here at EFCOC, fresh out of seminary. Brian was a brand new college student, entering Cal State Long Beach, fresh out of high school. And for the next 6 years, our lives were very closely intertwined. Brian and I grew close very quickly. We met together just about every week for Bible study and just to share our lives with each other. We spent more hours than I can count, not just talking about our faith, but also just talking about our lives. Brian shared a lot of his hopes and his dreams with me. He would talk about his longing to satisfy his curiosities and experience the joys of heaven. He was a curious guy, and he spent a lot of time pondering the Bible's great mysteries, like the description of heaven and eternal life. And that's one thing that brings me comfort, is to know that Brian has now had a lot of his questions answered. You know that Brian was also a very gifted artist, and I'll never forget the day he barged into my office and told me that he got his internship at Red 5 Studios, something we'd been praying about for several months, and I was so proud and excited to see the joy in his eyes and hear the confidence in his voice. Brian and I worked closely together at EFCOC. Brian grew up in this church, and he had a deep love for so many of you. In the time I was there, he ran our soundboard faithfully every single Sunday morning. He participated in our Tofu Bible study during the week. Tofu stood for the Old Fogies United. I loved that group. He also volunteered every Friday night with our youth group, and Brian had a really special relationship with our teens. His most famous event was our annual EFCOC Iron Chef competition. Brian combined his love for our youth group with his love for cooking and led us through an extremely fun, albeit maybe somewhat dangerous event every year. The last year we did it was the year the fire alarm went off mid-event, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that maybe having open flames all over our fellowship hall wasn't the safest thing in the world. But man, was it fun, and Brian did a great job leading that event. In 2011, our family moved up to Northern California. That meant Brian and I weren't able to meet together every week anymore. But he still is always going to hold a special place in my heart. Above everything else, I'm going to remember Brian as a young man who knew what it meant to be a friend. I know that he cared deeply for me and my family. There were times that we celebrated together. There were times that we grieved together. There were times that we simply just served and laughed and lived together. In all of it, Brian left an imprint on my life with his compassion, with his faith, and with his genuine love. My heart hurts over the loss of my friend, but I also find a lot of joy in imagining the unfathomable glory that he's now experiencing in the presence of God. Brian's found the peace that's been promised to everyone who follows Jesus, a peace that before we get to heaven we can only catch glimpses of on this earth. I want to close with paraphrasing the words of Paul. My friend Brian has fought the good fight, he's finished the race, he's kept the faith, and now there's laid up for him the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, has awarded to him on that day. And not only to him, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Just like each of you, I'm grateful for the time Brian was in my life, and I'm confident that we'll get to see him again if we follow his example of faith, and if we also put our trust in Jesus Christ. As Christians, that's the eternal hope that we have, and that's the hope that I'm holding fast to today, and I encourage you to hold fast to as well. God bless you guys.
Brown is also a good sport. Jason and I don't like to drive, but whenever we're going to head out somewhere, we'd pile into his CRV and he would take us around the place. The movies, RVs, grocery shopping, you name it. And whenever I go to visit Jason, Brian would also offer to drive that 2-hour trip.
Both ways?
Both ways, yeah. He's done that. I think the last couple of times it was all Brian.
And our last family vacation was December, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You did most of the driving up to Northern California.
Brian also really liked to do the dishes for Mom after dinner. Like, even though he was the first to leave, he would always be like, "I'll be back in like 5 to 10 minutes," and he would be. And sometimes he would not be, and I'd go over and, "Hey Brian, Mom's washing dishes," and he'd be like, "Oh no!" and he'd rush over to the kitchen like, "No, I'll do this. I said I'll do this."
Yeah, he took way more initiative about it than either of us ever did. Mm-hmm. So I work out in Coachella, and so it's a 2-hour drive there and back. So Brian would always be the person, he'd always ask me to make sure I message him back when I got home safely. And so he'd be the only person in the family that I would really do that most of the time. Sometimes I'd tell you, mm-hmm. but yeah, I think he was the most concerned. And every time I left, I'd hug everybody, and we all just hug each other as if it was our last time, because we knew, accidents can happen and you never know. So even though I didn't get a good chance to really say goodbye to him last week, I still felt like I did get to say goodbye to him, because we'd always hugged so many times as if it was our last time.
Yeah, and Brian also would often tell me that, "Hey John, I appreciate you," and just these simple gestures like that were very touching, and it gave me the opportunity to also like, "Brian, I appreciate you too." And so all this was out in the open. There was no doubt about the love in this family.
Yeah. Sometimes after like national tragedies, he'd tell me, "Jason, I love you," and I would say, not so convincingly, not with as much conviction as he did, but I would say, "I love you too," and I wish I'd done it more.
Yeah. He's also very affectionate with my mom. He'd kind of hang on her shoulder or something, and sometimes I would tag team and hang on the other shoulder, and we'd kind of maul her in that way. And then with my dad, he would, just at random times, maybe before or after dinner, he'd be like, "Papa, give me a hug," and he would do it. It was very sweet. Brian was a very generous soul. He would spend a lot of time preparing food for people, and he would take the costs upon himself to provide. He'd buy all the ingredients, spend many nights preparing these things, cooking things, stewing them. He used a slow pressure cooker a lot of times for his meat pies. I remember there being late nights where he was just trying to do things after my parents had gone to bed, and then early mornings after they left for work, he would be in a rush to complete his meat pie making, and sometimes he'd get my help as well. Like, "John, can you help me poke holes in these pie crusts?" Like, "All right." And there was a time when he was late to work as well for this. But
he would make 2 trays.
Yeah.
2 trays full of meat pies. Not sure how many that was, 15, 20, something like that. He'd bring them to church. multiple times. He'd bring him to work multiple times just to feed coworkers, and he'd make us meat pies and apple pies as well. And he only ate like one for himself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He liked making food more than eating it. And he loves eating food. So
Yeah. So I started teaching out in Coachella about 9 years ago, and Brian and John have both been coming out every year as guest speakers to talk to my students about 3D animation for Brian and computer programming for John. Good opportunity for my students to kind of see job opportunities out there. And see how they can use the math that they're learning in school, in our classroom, to be applied in like the video game industry. You can see it's always a more interesting day for them when my brothers show up.
Brian just loved to give, and he didn't expect anything in return. He just shared his life with people. I've always said, like, as we became an adult, time became my most precious resource. And Brian shared that generously.